Gittin Daf Nun Aleph begins in the middle of the Gemara's discussion about Nechasim Mishubadim, property which has been sold and someone wants to collect it as payment of an obligation that he has on the seller. There's a lien on the property. He wants to be able to take that away from the purchaser and say, hey, you bought that land, it has a lien on it to me and I can take it from you. So the Gemara has said that we saw in our last Mishnah that there's two types of obligations that you can't take away those Nechasim Mishubadim. You can't take that land away from the purchaser, and that is reimbursement for investment in stolen property. If somebody bought property, it turned out to be stolen, and he wants back the money that he invested in it, and the financial support, the food stipend that's given to a widow and to her female children, to the daughters. So the Gemara has been discussing why. So the Gemara said one reason is because it's not written anywhere, and the halacha is that you can't take away from a purchaser something which he didn't know about and could not have been wary not to buy the land. He has to have known that the lien was there and accepted the risk in order to be able to take it away from him. Something which is not written, how could he know about it? It was done privately. It's got to be that it's written, and the contract is available, the records exist, so that he could know to be wary. And if he bought it with the lien, that's when he's going to lose. Now, that's the Gemara's first answer. Rish Lakish said that. The Gemara now brings the second answer, or at the bottom of Daf Nun. The Gemara says because there's no fixed amount. You can't have the purchaser beware because there is no limit to how much you're going to be able to collect for the food stipend for the widow and for her daughters, because that could just keep going and going for years and years and years. So the purchaser doesn't know how much he could buy or not buy. What do you say? He should never buy anything from the husband because maybe one day he's going to die and his widow and his daughter are going to collect it. So there's no end to it. And if something that has no end, there's no way for the purchaser to be wary and to be aware of it, and therefore you can't collect that from property that was sold. Now, the Gemara asks this answer that Rabbi Chanina said, you can only take away property that has a fixed amount. Does Rabbi Chanina say you can take away property that's a fixed amount even if it's not written? Meaning, does Rabbi Chanina hold of the answer of Rish Lakish as well? He says that it's got to be fixed in order to take it away from the purchaser. Is that if it's fixed, can you take it away even if it's not written down? What does he hold of? Does he hold of this idea that it has to be well known, the records have to exist somewhere, and that the purchaser should be able to know that there's a lien on the property? So the Gemara wants to bring a proof to resolve this question as to what Rabbi Chanina holds from a Gemara in Maseches Ksubis, discussing lengthy and somewhat complicated case there. The Gemara discusses the right of a daughter to collect 1/10 of all her father's property after he dies in order to bring into her marriage as an nedunya, as the dowry, to make it attractive for men to marry her. So she gets 10% of all the property that's available at that time from her father's estate. Besides the food stipend that she gets, she also gets this for what's called parnasa. Parnasa sounds like it's for food, but it's for this nedunya. So the case is as follows. You have a man who died and he left one son and 2 daughters. And the son obviously inherited all the land, the property, and the daughters were receiving a food stipend. Now, one of the daughters went and got engaged, and she gets married, so she takes 10% for her marriage for the dowry. Now, then the son dies before the second daughter ever gets engaged and collects her 10%. When the son dies, the entire inheritance goes to the girls. So now those 2 girls want to collect it. So the question is, should they split it evenly, or should the second daughter get 10%? Can they get the 10% that the first daughter got and then split the rest evenly so that they'll end up with a full even split? Meaning, does the first one gain her 10% over the ultimate division that the second one will have? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan paskin that the first daughter gets to keep her 10% and they split the rest evenly. The second one doesn't get 10%, can they get her 10%? Now, the Gemara says that this Rabbi Chanina asked on him. Rabbi Chanina said, I don't understand you. Of course she gets it. Let's say the son would have sold the property, and then the second daughter gets engaged, and she wants to collect her 10%, and the son says, sorry, it's all been sold. So she could take her 10%. She could take the 10% from the buyer. She could collect from the Nechasim Mishubadim. So she could collect from the buyer who bought it from her brother. She could certainly collect it from her sister who inherited it from her brother. She has at least as much rights as she has at least as much right to take it from her sister in her split as she could take it from a random buyer who bought it. So therefore, she should certainly, when she actually goes and gets married, she shouldn't be able to go to her sister and say, hey, 10% of the property should have come to me. Now I get the 10 percent that I should have got from my ksuba above and beyond the share that I got when we split it evenly. Now, from this Gemara, what you see is that Rabbi Chanina is clearly holding that you could collect for the daughter from the land that's been sold. You could collect from the Chasim Mishubadim. So the Gemara therefore says you do have a proof. Now that Parnasa, that's not written anywhere. So you do have a proof that Rabbi Chanina holds you don't have to have it written in order to be able to collect from it. So the Gemara says is not a proof. The collection of Parnasa for the dowry is a Ma'aseh Beis. Everybody knows that happens. Everybody knows that obligation is there. And therefore it's as good as if it's written. The purchaser should know that. And if he does not, if he's not wary that he may lose that land because of that obligation which exists, it's his own fault. Not the same as a loan or something which is made in privately and in secret. It's not written anywhere that he could not have known about. The Gemara now wants to bring a raya to Rav Chanina over Reish Lakish. Rav Chanina said you can only collect from Mishubadim if it's a fixed amount. Reish Lakish said the issue is that it should be written. Someone wants to prove that if it's a fixed amount, even if it's not written, you could collect from the Chasim Mishubadim. So the Gemara brings another case in Ksubas. This is where a man marries a woman and she signs with him. They agree that he's going to support her daughters for 5 years. Whatever happens 5 years after the end of the marriage, he's going to support her. Even though that wouldn't necessarily be the standard halacha, that's what he accepts upon himself. Then they get divorced. And she goes and she marries somebody else, and she makes the same deal with him that he's also going to support the daughters for 5 years. So now the first husband and the second husband are both supporting the daughters in overlapping times. So over there, the halacha is that one husband has to give her food, the other has to give her money for food, and then she could use it for whatever she wants. Now, what happens if both men die? So their own daughters cannot collect from the Chasim Mishubadim, because it's just a food stipend, which we said doesn't come from Mishubadim. But this girl who was promised 5 years, that's not considered to be a food stipend, because that was a stipulation that her mother put into her ksuba, and that's something that is already considered to be a set obligation, that is like a loan, and therefore she can collect that no matter how long. She can collect from Mishubadim like the halacha always is. So says the Gemara, there seems to be a proof that if you have a fixed amount, even if it's not written, like this food, like this amount that the mother had promised for her daughter, so he will collect from the Chasim Mishubadim. Now, says the Gemara, no, it's not a proof. The answer is that they made a kinyan here, that the original husband and the second husband made a kinyan to obligate themselves to pay, and that means that it was ultimately written. So Gemara says if they made a kinyan, so then why should it be different for his own daughters, let's say the second husband's own daughters, that they can't collect from the Chasim Mishubadim, but if he made a kinyan for the first wife, he probably made a kinyan for the second wife, and he made a kinyan for his own daughters. So if kinyanim exists, so then it should also be considered to be like a written obligation, and the daughters of the second husband should be able to collect from the Chasim Mishubadim as well. So Gemara says, no, they didn't make a kinyan for the second daughters. They only made a kinyan for the first daughter. So Gemara says, so then how is that a halacha? Now you're telling me if they made a kinyan, then they collect. If they don't make a kinyan, they don't collect. So why would the first daughter from the previous marriage that had the 5-year deal, why would they make a kinyan and not the second one? Why did the Tana set it up that way? What does it have to do with the halacha here? So the Gemara tries a few approaches to this. So the Gemara says that the first approach is that the kinyan wouldn't work for the second daughter. It only works for the first daughter. The first daughter is from a previous marriage, so she's alive already at the time that the second marriage is made, and therefore the kinyan is chal for her because she exists. She's bala elam. She's here. The daughters that are born from the second marriage, they're not born at the time of the kinyan. They can't be chal. A kinyan can't be chal for them what they're going to collect because they're not there. So you do a kinyan on their behalf, they're not there. So the Gemara says, but that's not a mashma from the Mishnah. The Mishnah is mashma even if they were there. What would the case be? That the second husband married her twice, married her, divorced her, the children were already born, and then he married her again, and then they made a kinyan. The Mishnah doesn't give any indication that halacha wouldn't be true in that case as well. So the Gemara answers, really the pshat is that the first daughter, the one that has the 5-year deal, that's not a Tanai Bezin. That's a special arrangement that she made. So there, you'll make a kinyan, and the kinyan works. The second daughters, that's a regular halacha that the Bezin made, that a man has to support his daughters, and therefore, since the Tanai Bezin exists, the kinyan that they made is worthless. So Gemara just goes right away. The Gemara says, why should the kinyan get worse just because it's a Tanai Bezin that's added on? It should be even stronger. So Gemara says, no, the pshat is because since it's a Tanai Bezin and he made a kinyan, he's more concerned to pay it, and therefore he probably set money aside and gave it to her. And that's why she can't collect from Nechas Mishibadim, because he already probably set aside money for her. The first daughter, there's no money set aside. We could assume that, and therefore she could collect from Nechas Mishibadim. Says the Gemara, now we have a proof that the reason you can't collect from Nechas Mishibadim in our Mishnah is nothing to do with not fixed amount and not because it's not written. Both reasons are false. And that's because we have another statement. We have a Reb Nassim who says that this is the third reason. And this is referring to the other case which is listed in the Mishnah that you can't collect from Mishbadim, and that's reimbursement for investment in stolen land. So the case is as follows. The case is where Reuven stole land from Shimon and sold it to Levi, and Levi invested money in the land, and then Shimon came and took his land away, took his land back. So now Levi goes back to Reuven and says, you owe me. So the halacha is that he takes away Reuven's property that he owes to reimburse him for the land that he had sold him stolen land. However, he can only take from sold land. Let's say that means that Reuven had other land that he sold, let's say to Yehuda, can only take that land away from Yehuda for the actual sale price of the stolen land that he bought from Reuven. The investments that he put into the land, Reuven's responsible for those too, but that you can't take away from the Nechas Mishbadim. You can't take from the land that Reuven had sold to Yehuda. Now, says the Gemara that Rav Nassim says this is only true if the land that Reuven sold to Yehuda was sold before Levi invested the money that he invested into the stolen land, because Yehuda cannot have known that there was going to be any obligation that Reuven was going to have to Levi for the stolen land that he sold him. However, if Levi had invested that money already, and it was known that this money was going to have to be reimbursed at some point, the land had been stolen, and Reuven was going to end up having to pay Levi for what he invested, and Yehuda went and bought land from Reuven anyway. Why he bought from a thief is a different story, but he went and he bought from Reuven anyway, so that's his problem. He should have known that he was going to lose that eventually to Levi, and therefore he could take it away even though it's Mishibada. So the Gemara says, you see clearly, it has nothing to do with being Ketsuvin, nothing to do with the fact that it's not a fixed amount, and nothing to do with the fact that it's not written. You could take it. The only problem was because it wasn't known. It didn't exist at the time that Yehuda bought the land. That's the issue. So what are you telling me? It's because of written, it's because of Ketsuvin. So the Gemara says it's actually a three-way machlekes tanaim. The Gemara brings a brisa that shows clearly that there are opinions that say it's because of written and because of fixed amount. So the brisa says you cannot take land away, you cannot take nechasim mishubadim to collect for investments or fruits on stolen land, or for the food stipend for a widow or the daughters. The first opinion says mipnei tikkun ha'olam, because they're not written. Because if they're not written, nobody can ever know what loan there is and can buy land safely. And that's the first opinion. And Rav Yossi says it's not a tikkun ha'olam, it's because it's not a fixed amount, and therefore you see those two opinions do exist. The Gemara now moves on to the next case in our Mishnah, which is that of someone who's returning a lost object. The person that he's returning to says, hey, you didn't return it all to me. There was more that you found, and I want you to return the rest of it. And that person says, no, this is all I found. It's an argument to go to court, and there is an obligation to swear, or there should be an obligation to swear. So the Mishnah says the person who found it does not have to swear that he did not find more than this. Now, where would this obligation to swear come from? So generally, there's a rule called Moed b'Miktas. Anytime somebody claims you owe him and you agree to part of the claim, you have to swear on the rest of it. And the Gemara will explain soon why that is. So what our Mishnah is saying is, Mipnei Tikkun Olam, we said that you don't have to swear if the argument is over a lost or found object. Now, the Tikkun Olam, the Gemara doesn't explain it here, but it appears to be that if people know that they're going to have to swear if they return this, they're just not going to bother returning things. They're going to see something and walk away, because why should I pick it up and return it? And maybe the guy's going to claim that there was really more that he lost, so I'm going to have to start swearing. What do I need it for? So therefore, they said you don't have to swear in a case like that. Now, the Gemara quotes Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Yitzchak doesn't learn that there's an automatic patur from swearing just because it's a lost object or a found object. And the Gemara is going to ask why. But Rabbi Yitzchak divides up this halacha as referring to other circumstances. So he says that it works as follows. The reason you wouldn't have to swear is because the other person, the one who lost it, doesn't know for a fact that you found it. He's saying you found it. How is he supposed to know what you found? If you have a circumstance, however, where he can know, or his claim is a strong claim, he has a vade claim where he could say, look, we all know that you found it, then if there's a partial admission, you would have to swear just like any case of partial admission. So Rabbi Yitzchak says the halacha is as follows. So if the finder says, look, this is what I found, and the loser says, no, you lost more than you found more than that. So it depends what the object is. If it was, let's say, 2 wallets, and he says, look, I lost 2 wallets tied to each other, and the other one says, okay, I don't know what you lost, but I only found one. So there, you do have to swear. And the reason is because the 2 wallets won't separate. And the one who says that they were tied together knows that the 2 were together, and he's making a certain claim that you definitely found both of them. How would they have been separated? They don't run away from each other. So he's making a vade claim. He's saying you found both of them. The other one's saying, no, I only found one. Okay, we don't know who's lying, so you have to swear. If, however, he says, I found 2 oxen, if he says, I lost the 2 oxen, the other guy says, look, I only found 1 ox, so the oxen could have broken apart from each other, and he only found 1. The one who lost it, it's not making a claim you found 2 oxen. He doesn't know what the guy found. He's only saying 1. He's not arguing over what he found. So therefore, you have no cause to force him to swear, because you don't have a vadai claim that he really found 2. You're not saying he's lying. You don't know what he found. Now, what would be in a similar situation, but instead of saying what I found, they're arguing over what he found. The finder says, you're right. I found 2 oxen, but I already returned 1, so I'm only returning the second one now. I don't owe you anything else. So in that case, it's also a vadai taina. They're also arguing over who's lying. The one who lost it is saying, no, you never returned 1. The one who found it is saying, I did return 1, but they both agree that he found the 2 oxen. They're arguing, they're lying, they're arguing over who's lying, did he return it or not. So in that case, you would also have to swear. So that's how Rabbi Yitzchak explains this halacha. So the Gemara asks, none of this fits in our mission. The mission says that if you find the lost object, you don't have to swear. So what's he talking about? So the Gemara says, Machlekes Tanaim. And this is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov's opinion. He holds that there are certain situations in which you swear on finding on an object that you found, or something which is considered to be as if you found it. The Gemara brings this brises, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and the Chachamim, and the way it's phrased, the Gemara is going to need to explain. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says there are times when a person swears on his own claim. Which sounds like that no one has a claim against him. He's just offering something. What's the case? So if somebody says to another person, so Reuben says to Shimon, look, your father was owed $100 of me. I owed him $100, and I already returned half, so here's 50. I already returned 50 to him. So you still have to swear. You're admitting to part of an obligation, and you have to swear. So the Chachamim say, what do you mean he's admitting to part of an obligation? There is no obligation. He's returning a lost object. Now, the Gemara understands this to mean that Shimon had no idea that there was any obligation here at all. He had no claim. He has nothing to say. So if Reuben wouldn't come forward and say, I owe you 50 because I borrowed 100 from your father and I paid back half, then it will be a totally lost object from Shimon. He would have nothing to do with this. He's not aware that any claim exists over here. So this is like returning a lost object. That's returning a lost object. And therefore, you don't have to swear on returning this lost object. You see, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, even though it's like returning a lost object, because he's admitting that there was an obligation of 100 at some point, you do have to swear. So Gemara asks, what is going on here? Why does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov say you have to swear? He doesn't agree that if you return a lost object, that you don't have to swear, like our Mishnah says here. Meaning the Gemara is unfolding its explanation of how you have a machlekes tanaim here. So the Gemara tries to explain a few different ways as to what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov means when he says you have to swear in this case. So the Gemara first wants to say, Shimon is a child, and Shimon and Shimon, the child, was making a claim. He wasn't not saying anything. He did not know. He was making a claim. He was claiming, you owe me 100. And you borrowed 100 from my father, you owe me 100. Reuben was saying, I admit to 50, but the other 50 I paid already. So there is a claim. It's not a lost object, but it's the claim of a child. So where I asks, a claim of a child is meaningless. We have a Mishnah that says you don't have to swear if you have a claim against you for mecheresh, shaita, or katan. Well, those people consider not to have das, their claims aren't valid. And if the only case is based on their claim, you don't have to swear. So the Gemara therefore changes slightly. The Gemara says, okay, so we're not really talking about a real katan, not really talking about a child. We call him a katan, which means the small one. We mean that it's an adult, but it's his father's claim. He's claiming that he owed money to my father. And we call him a child because he doesn't really know. He has no hard evidence that his father was ever actually owed the money. As far as he knows, the father may have received it in return already, who knows. So the Gemara says, okay, but then why are you calling it Tainus Atzma? Why are you saying that he's returning, why are you saying that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says he's returning the money based on his own claim? It's not his own claim. There's a valid claim of an adult against him. So that's not called his own claim. That doesn't fit in what's happening here in this case. So Gemara says, what we mean is someone else's claim, and it's his own admission. It's not his own taina, it's his own admission. So every case where two people argue and one person admits to half is a valid claim and his own admission. Why would this be any different than anything else? What is Rabbi Eliezer? I mean, sometimes a person swears because of his own claim. This is a standard example of one swearing because of Maida V'Mixas. So the Gemara therefore says that they're arguing about Rabba's halacha. And the Gemara explains, what is the reason that a Maida V'Mixas, somebody who swears partially, someone who admits to a partial obligation, what is the reason that he has to swear on the rest? So Rab explains it as follows. This is a rule that a person does not deny a claim that's made to him by somebody who knows it. If you're staring the guy in the face and he knows you're lying, you don't have the chutzpah to deny the claim that he made. And that's why this person is admitting halfway. Meaning whenever you admit to half a claim, it seems to have legs to the claim, because it sounds like what's happening here is that you really want to admit, because you don't have the chutzpah to deny the entire claim. And that's why you're willing to admit to part of the claim. Now, the Gemara adds, if you are denying the claim, you are a liar, and you're willing to steal money, you have a rule that someone who steals money, we can't believe his shvua, his swearing either. Someone says, no, that he's really trying to return everything, he's just trying to get some time here. He wants to push him off a bit until he can collect the rest of the money. So now, the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Ben Yaakov and the Chachamim is in our case where it's the child who's making the claim. And the question is, does a person have the chutzpah to deny the claim to the child? The child is not the person who lent him the money. Does that bother him to deny it as well? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says he does not have the ability to deny the claim, and therefore the fact that he's willing to admit to part of it is because he can't face himself, and therefore it's not returning a lost object. It's responding to the claim that he doesn't have the strength to deny. So not a lost object, and that's why you have to swear, just like any other case. The Rabbanan say he could be very happy to deny the entire thing. He's not talking to the person who he borrowed money from, and he would have no trouble lying and denying the entire thing. If he's admitting to part of it, he's not giving any support to that person's claim at all. He's giving him a lost object. He has no leg to stand on his own. And therefore, the fact that he's admitting is completely like he's returning a lost object, and there's no reason that he should have to swear because of an admission that he makes. So why should you penalize him because he's willing to admit to part when he had no reason to?